every few years, a new gun comes out that uses the Glock internal design and says, is this gun the Glock killer? And there's a huge big debate about it, and all the Glock guys get up on their high horse and no, we'll never get away from the Glock. We love Glocks, yada, yada, yada. Is this the Glock killer? So there's two guns that we're going to talk about, and but specifically, two guns that I'm going to talk about, which are the Shadow Systems and the Glock, and then we'll talk a little bit about the PSA daggers. So I don't own a PSA dagger, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. But anyways, so Glock, y'all know Glock. Glock was created in about the 80s. I think like 19 is like, I don't remember what year. Somebody put it down in the comments if you remember what year Glock actually got his first patent on the Glock 17. So Glock was created in around about the early 80s. It's a polymer frame firearm. The mechanism, the internal mechanism, has remained largely unchanged. They've done a few modifications to it, but it has remained largely unchanged since the original design. The polymer has gone through some different iterations, and there's been some different iterations to, slide stippling, or frame stippling, finger grooves, no finger grooves, ambidextrous safeties, and or ambidextrous magazine releases. And now with the Gen 5, they got ambidextrous slide releases. So there have been some stuff going on with them in that sense. The Shadow Systems are based on a Gen 4 Glock design, so they don't have an ambidextrous slide release. They do have an ambidextrous magazine release. They've already done all. You can see all the cuts on the slide to lighten the slide and to give it some texture to be able to grab to, and that does make a difference, guys, when you're talking about grabbing and stuff and getting a good meaty paw on there. They've obviously cut in here for an RMR. This is all factory, so the only thing that I've done to this is I did add a extended slide or slide release there. I always put an extended slide release on any guns that I shoot a lot and that I compete with. Then they flared the magwell out, which Glock has also done to their Gen 5 models, and so it's about the same as a Gen 5 in that sense. The stippling is more similar to like a sandpaper grit on here, so it does give you a good bit of grit to actually be able to grab onto and get a good hand on there. You can tell it was designed by shooters. They've got grit up here and everything, so you have a place to rest your thumb and actually be able to get a good support hand grip on that firearm. So these guns were designed by shooters. These do use a match grade barrel. I know Glock Gen 5 uses a match grade barrel. Let's talk about the price difference in them. The Shadow Systems has two models, the Combat and the Elite. The Combat model is being discontinued on several different models because it's not as popular. The Combat model for this one runs about $700. This is the Elite version. This Elite version runs $1,100, so it is a little bit more expensive. The Elite version, the only thing that they add that's different from the Combat version is you do get the slide cut out there for your RMR, and then they do this little lightning slide here, or cut here on the Elite version, which doesn't really do anything but make it look cooler. So a lot of guys buy the Combat version and then send it off to have the slide milled, which is fairly common. The Shadow Systems, they're designed for the RMR cut, allows you to use a bunch of different optics. So that's the big benefit to doing the Elite model, is that you get to use all these different, so you can change optics. Whereas if you get it milled, then you're kind of stuck with ones that are in that footprint. Or you have to mill to a larger footprint, but you can't go. You have to get spacers in there to go backwards. It's just kind of a hassle. So buying the Shadow Systems one is more expensive than sending a Combat version off and having it milled, but you get some advantages there that you don't have to deal with a lot of that hassle and the headache of changing it around. So I've been a big fan of the Elite versions, but we also have Combat versions. Madeline shoots a Combat version. We'll send her slide off and get it milled when she's ready to put an optic on there. So they use the same magazines. All the magazines are shared. I can use Magpul, I can use Glock. I end up using a lot of Glock magazines. They come with Magpul magazines. I end up using a lot of Glock magazines because the metal and the Glock actually work with some of my magnet magazine holders for daily carry, the ones that I put in my pocket. As far as the sights on them, Glock uses shitty quality sights, so you always have to punch out Glock sights and put new decent quality sights on there. These ones are Vickers Tactical sights on there. Old school Vickers Tactical, that was like 10 years old. Wasn't he the one, I think he just got arrested, right? Wasn't he the one that got arrested? Anyways, then Shadow Systems. Shadow Systems you don't have to do anything to. They come combat ready. They already have a good sight, a good tritium, blacked out rear, and they are really, really solid. So the only thing that I do is on Amanda Lynn's gun, I put an extended magazine release because her smaller hands, she has trouble hitting the regular one without readjusting. If I put an extended one on there, she can hit it without readjusting her hand. So she uses an extended magazine release, and then I put extended extended slide releases on both guns, and I do it on all guns because for whatever reason they didn't upgrade that. I don't understand why. So the shadow systems. Will the shadow systems kill the Glock? No, for a number of reasons. One, because it's more expensive. Even though it's not really that much more expensive when you include the price of putting in new sights in your Glock, but it is more expensive, and so it'll never take the Glock out of the market for that. The other reason is that there's a lot of like just dedicated Glock guys that'll never buy anything else, and so because of that, you'll never get rid of it. There's just too many kind of, they call them the fanboys. Hate to use that because I'm kind of a Glock fanboy myself, but the reality of it is that every gun guy should have a Glock. We all need a Glock. So it will not replace the Glock. Is it going to make a good dent in their sales over the next 20 years? Yeah, I think so. I think they're going to end up with a good share of the market because they're going to get a lot of guys like me that really like kind of the performance edge of Glocks and like really pushing those performance limits, and so it'll all these different companies will take some of the market share from Glock, but it's they're smaller companies, right? Glock's the big Goliath in here, and these are smaller companies. So the Glock is going to be the one that is going to be able to ride out any of the storms, and some of these other companies may not. Now, you have the three competitors right now that are getting kind of well known. You have Zev, you have Shadow Systems, you have PSA Dagger. Okay, PSA Dagger kind of on the lower budget end, Shadow Systems in the middle, Zev at the top end. Those three are going to be competing for a share of Glock's market. They're all competing in a little bit different category. Zev is marketing to a higher end crowd. Shadow Systems is marketing to people like me that are shooters, but maybe don't have the money to spend on a Zev, or if I was going to spend money on a Zev, I'm going to buy a Wilson. So they're competing with a little bit different crowd. And then the PSA Dagger is a great budget option. So you're going to see a lot of guys again like us that own a range using something like a PSA Dagger here for our students rather than Glocks because the PSA Daggers are cheaper and they come ready in a lot of ways that the Glocks don't, and so there's some advantages to using the PSA Daggers in that sense because they're already cut for RMRs. They're already the slides are already cut. The stippling's already done on them. So there's some huge advantages in that sense. So we're going to give some PSA Daggers a try. But at the end of the day, is anybody going to knock Glock out? No. Canics not either. Canics seem to be getting popular. I think they're ugly as shit, but Canics seem to be getting popular. And anyways, it's just one of those things to where nobody's going to take Glock off in the foreseeable future. But the reality of it is that they are going to be taking some of Glock's market share. How much is debatable, but certainly now that there's other options out there, there's no argument that they'll take the market share. It's just by definition they will take the market share because the market share is the same, but there's more competitors in there, striving for the business. So. Shadow Systems, I think, will continue to grow. I think Shadow Systems hit the sweet spot. I think the Zev reached too high and tried to do too high end of a Glock. And Shadow Systems said, well, we can take some things with the Glock, make it better, mass produce it, and make a really higher end combat ready pistol that's right out of the box ready to go and nobody has to do anything to it. So they need to go back to the box and redesign a few things with the Shadow Systems. They need an ambidextrous slide release and they need to put a fatter slide release on there. They need to just go ahead and include these bigger ones as a standard feature. If they will do that and probably put higher end magazines with their guns. I know they've got their contract with Magpul right now. Personally, metal magazines work better, and I know there's some argument on that, but here's the thing about metal magazines. Metal magazines actually seem to disengage from the pistol better, and so they don't get stuck up in there, and sometimes you're stuck fighting them and trying to rip them out and that sort of thing, and so metal magazines have some advantage in that sense. And so what I wish Shadow Systems would do is I wish that Shadow Systems would make a metal magazine the exact size of whatever's going in there so I could use that in this gun, and then swap out the magazine release with a steel magazine release or an aluminum magazine release. And I think that if they were to make a few upgrades in that sense that really wouldn't cost them anything, I think there would be no debate about Shadow Systems being kind of the superior gun of the big ones that are competing against Glock right now. Other than that, y'all, so these are just kind of my thoughts on it. Like I said, I don't think that Shadow Systems is going to knock out Glock, but they certainly have taken at least one customer with them because I'm pretty devout to Shadow Systems now. As far as for our classes, like I said, we may do Glocks because they're cheaper, but then again, I have to upgrade the sights on them. For the Shadow Systems, I don't have to upgrade the sights. One thing with the Glocks that Shadow Systems is not competing on is Shadow Systems only makes 9mm, so Glock's still got all the other calibers to compete with. So it's not like it's a huge market share that they're losing by just losing some of the 9mm guys that are going to other guns. So guys, I'll leave y'all with that. I really appreciate y'all watching. Make sure and like and subscribe